we say, oh, why does bad things happen to good people? Well, what is a good person? We are all sinners in need of a savior. And for him to say, hey, I'm going to come in, what's fair is that we don't get to live the life we live. But we serve an unfair God who's crazy about us. And he says, hey, it's not fair and it's not deserved. That's why it's called grace. But not only am I going to give you eternity, but in the midst of your trials here, your struggles, your ups and downs and everything in the middle, if you'll trust me, I'll walk through it with you.
Welcome back to All Things Possible. Today, we have an amazing guest named Matt Monzari.
He is a good friend of ours. We've done lots of family adventures. Our families jam together, but there's a lot more that meets the eye with Matt. He has been through a crazy amount of trials, a lot of physical damage to his body, and yet he carries life with so much joy and purpose, and he knows where his identity is in. And so we hope today's episode and conversation gets you fired up to go and live life to the fullest.
So join us today on All Things Possible. And if you can please leave us a review down below, that'd be amazing. Don't forget to check the show notes as well for resources that we're going to provide. And smash that like. Please leave us a comment and enjoy today's episode with Matt Monzari. Man, you've just been such encouragement in our lives, and we're super thankful for your friendship, your family's friendship, and we have already solidified some awesome adventures with the boys and seeing manatees and all that fun stuff. But dude, yeah, just maybe there's a lot of people here who don't know you and your story like we know you. As wanted to jump straight in, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Central Florida. My wife is from this area as well. We have 3 boys, your boys' age, and that's why they all love each other so much. Justice, Trigg, and Hardy, they're 6, 8, and 10. And my wife, Bobby Jean, she's awesome. Kind of some of my background, I loved water sports and turned pro when I was 14, and it was pretty amazing. Got to travel the world. Got to be the first wake athlete on Nike, which was huge early in my career, and got to go some really cool places and do some amazing stuff. And then
wait, can we just elaborate? Matt rips super hard.
Yeah, we got
wake skating. Wait, is it
props
wake
where
skating,
props
right?
is due?
Yeah.
Yeah. So his life is on a boat, ripping on the back wake. You had a competitive career for a while too, right?
So wake skating, I mean, that was my life, and it was really amazing. And I actually had a pretty big injury wake skating, and since then, I've kind of morphed now to a lot more time wake surfing. Wake foiling is huge. I love to foil and surf now. It's a little easier on my body at this stage in my life. But I had a ton of fun trying to push my sport and really we can talk about that, but the podcast is All Things Possible. And for me, I was a 14-year-old kid who I loved sports, and I wasn't necessarily great at them. I'd love to sit here and tell you I was a talented athlete, but when I was 14, my dad told me the story of how for hundreds of years nobody could ever run a mile in under 4 minutes. And in May of 1954, Roger Bannister runs the sub 4-minute mile. Within 6 years, by the end of that decade, we had 30 people do it, and since hundreds and even high schoolers have done it. And when I heard that at 14, I wasn't like an endurance athlete. I didn't like to run or swim very much. But what translated was I said, man, maybe something so physical like run that way, I'll time you, has a much bigger mental component. And I started to go out and I said, man, there's these tricks I love in skateboarding that haven't been done in the water. And maybe it's possible to do some of those things. And I got in this mindset that these were common tricks that everybody did, that I did every day, when in reality they were things that I had never done and nobody else had. And I got a bunch of NBDs and got the attention of some big brands. And I'd love to sit here and say, oh, I had this gift or this talent, but I didn't. I was a regular kid that had a passion for action sports, and when I changed my thinking, it changed my life, and I realized that God has created us to do and be so much more than we can imagine. And sometimes we're so busy looking at the competitor next to us that we're missing the competitor in the mirror, that we're putting these limits on that God never put on us.
Yeah, I love that. That makes me think of like, so you translated what your dad said about the runner beating the time, and then all the other runners saw that that runner could do it, and so a bunch of other runners beat that world record. So you pushed yourself in your sport of wake skating. And I think of myself in surfing. I was such a unique case because I only surfed with one arm, but I didn't have anyone else surfing with one arm, so I was truly always kind of competing against myself. And yeah, I competed against my competitors as well, but there was that element of like truly competing against myself and always pushing myself to do things that maybe I didn't think I could do. And I think I love how you're pointing it too to God. Like God calls us to work at everything we do with excellence and with all our heart and soul and mind, and to do our best. And that's a big call though, like to do that in every aspect of life, like that's a lot. And but I like how in sport you can learn so much about it and then translate it into other areas of life. But
Absolutely.
so you had this competitive career, you were one of the first Nike athletes wake skating, and then kind of step us into adulthood. Like what was life like then? And at some point you had, I don't know the timeline of your accidents, but you had multiple accidents that you are, grateful to be alive today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I joked that I was like 18 and I had to kind of bring you forward like a little bit of a midlife crisis because it was like, I mean, you're a kid riding your board, spending time on the water, and you think this is what will make me happy. You go up to a kid playing Little League and say, you want to get paid to do this and travel. Of course, that's like winning the lottery. And I had all these things like, if only I could get a cover of the magazine or a big sponsor or win this award or this title, it would be like, then you've really made it. And I think I was like kind of like the donkey chasing the carrot, where it was just never going to be enough. And I just felt like God put on my heart, hey, where do I and others fit into this you world? And I had friends say I was throwing my life away. And I kind of like was like, even if I lose my career in action sports, like I want to go serve and love people. And I went to school for theology and did a 4-year degree. And amazingly, I was able to keep almost all my sponsors through college and keep riding, which was awesome. During that time, Bobby Jean and I got married. So fast forward, we're 2 years into our marriage. I'm about to graduate, and the first contest for the Pro Tour is in Orlando. So I have a great idea, like, oh, we can drive. We're moving back to Orlando. We could bring a U-Haul with our stuff, and I'll go compete, maybe podium, have like a last hurrah for what I thought would be one of the last contests I'd ride. And I had ridden in this lake many times, and it's a man-made lake. It's great for competing because it's really narrow, so the crowd can kind of sit close to shore and watch you go by. But what's really unique is it funnels into like a bottleneck, a skinny canal at the end, and the boat goes through at high speed. And then when it turns around, none of those waves make it back to the pass. So it stays really calm, so it's good for water skiing and wakeboarding. And I knew how many tricks I could fit in, and I was coming in for my last trick, and what they tell me happened is the wave kind of curled over, and I kind of hesitated, said speed up, and kept edging, not realizing the boat had now entered this canal. Because boats go through on high speed, they'd had local construction companies dump extra rock, because we don't really have rocks in Florida, so broken up sidewalk and cinder block was lining that shoreline to keep erosion away. And I hit the shoreline. The boat's going 22 miles an hour. When you edge, you can almost double the speed of the boat. So my body's probably moving about 30, and I hit this rock-covered shoreline. I break my skull in 13 places, break my jaw clean on both sides, dislocate my hip, break my tailbone, and broke my hand in 5 places. So it was a huge setback, to say the least. You know, Bobby and I were this like young couple against the world, like kind of moving from an action sports career to dabbling in action sports and wanting to, you know, maybe go be missionaries or help people. We don't know what we wanted to do. And I had made it through what I would think would be a pretty long action sports career with no injuries, and then had this huge accident. And I wake up in this hospital bed like, I just missed my finals. I lost a semester of school. Our apartment lease is up on Friday. How am I going to work? How am I going to provide for Bobby? Like, what does getting through this look like? And really the most probably broken moment I had ever experienced. I just felt like I saw God just be like, hey, I'm right here, and put people and situations in place that when we came out of that 8 months later, like I had to learn to walk again with a walker and then a cane. And then 8 months later, I came out fully physically recovered, but emotionally, spiritually changed forever. And I remember thinking, like, I didn't see a way out. And I watched at my weakest point how there was a way. And whatever I face, I want to carry that principle, and not realizing it would really prepare me for this huge accident that would change my life forever down the road.
Gosh, I mean, like, even that incident alone is like the standard questions, like, why does God allow these awful things to happen to good people? You know, in perspective, it's not like, you know, I mean, thank the Lord you didn't die. I mean, you could have in that situation. But yeah, where did that leave you with your faith during that time? Like, what was going through your mind? And
that's the question. You know, I've seen pastors avoid that question. People leave the church because they're like, I can't subscribe to a God that would allow pain and suffering on this level. And I think one thing to remember is like we're finite beings serving an infinite God, and we look at death as so final. And the Bible talks about this life being like a blink, like, and if I were to say to you, man, Adam, you're going to experience ups and downs and tremendous amounts of pain and joy for the next 10 seconds, and then you'll never experience pain or suffering again, would you be like, man, you're so harsh, you're so evil, Matt? You'd be like, yeah, 10 seconds, I got this. But when we think of our life in comparison to eternity in a perfect place, it really is. You know, and also I think there's a lot of insight to it in the book of Job. You know, in Job, it's like there's this interaction between Satan and God before in the setup, and he's like, you know, have you considered my servant Job? And Satan basically, to paraphrase, says, well, yeah, because you bless him and he has a great life. If you curse him and hurt him, he'll curse you and die. And God's response is basically like, that's not my game. I don't do that. Like, God didn't say, okay, watch this, boom, and zap Job. Like, he is goodness. He is in light. He is light. There's no darkness in him. And yes, this world is not our home, and sin and brokenness is a part of it. And I think people do evil things. I think accidents happen, that this world is full of pain and brokenness, but the gospel isn't that we will go through life and not experience pain. The gospel is that in this world that's not our home, John 16:33 says, I tell you that so that in me you'll have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. And, you know, a big theme through my accident was really realizing that I'm asking God to deliver me from this situation, but he did 2,000 years ago on a cross. That even if I die, it's not this prosperity gospel of, God, if you save me, then I'll serve you. It's, if God, if you never do another thing for me, I owe you the rest of my life because you've already been so good. And you've already, you've had a plan from the foundation of the world that I get eternity with you. And we have the spoiler to the end of the story.
And so, but for you, this was just domino number one-ish. So next, we're going into something way heavier, way harder, way gnarlier.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was 2 years from my first accident, and I had actually started riding again, and was kind of trying to figure out next steps. Mm-hmm. And we have a mutual friend, Kevin Durham. He has a ministry, This Is My Story. And I had signed a contract to go on staff with them where you actually tell athletes testimonies and stories and put those out there. And a week after signing that, I was helping trim trees at a church in Orlando, and the main power line arced over, and I got 12 to 21,000 volts to ground. I had 4th and 5th degree burns all over my upper body. You kind of don't even hear about 4th and 5th degree. Even my burn center had never had a 5th degree burn survivor at that time. You have 3rd degree, which burns through the layers of skin. 4th burns the muscle, and 5th starts burning bone. And typically when you start burning bone, it has destroyed all the muscle between the skin and the bone. So if you can't remove it quickly, you're feeling your muscles, when your blood flows through them, a dead muscle is basically just bacteria. It's poisoning your blood, and you go septic, and it's, unless you can amputate quickly and it's on an extremity, it's usually fatal. So to kind of bring you into that world, Bobby Jean was there at the scene. She was pregnant with our first, with Justice, and she said you could see my left rib cage and sternum and clavicle bone exposed, and then it was just muscle hanging out. There's no skin left. And she said she really didn't see how I could go from whatever I looked like to ever being like a human again. And the EMTs were holding her back, and eventually let her through. And she just said, I said goodbye in the best way I could, because it just didn't look like there was any chance. And then by the time I got to the hospital, I'd already fallen into a coma. First surgery that they said, we'll know if we can save him in a couple hours. 8 hours later, it still wasn't looking good. And really, when I woke up, Dr. Smith, my head surgeon, he kind of cleared the room, and this was a couple weeks later. And he said, Matt, the gift you're getting that nobody gets is you're getting the opportunity to say goodbye. He said, you've had tremendous muscle loss. We've removed your pectoral majors, a lot of your upper arm muscle. We're doing surgeries every day to remove and debride dead muscle, but you're right on the verge of what's called septic. And when that happens, you're going to have a few hours probably to live. So I prepared my living will. I planned my funeral so Bobby Jean wouldn't have to. I registered it with the state, my living will. And I just kind of, at that time, like, living wasn't really on the table. And we were about 2 weeks from our gender reveal. And I said, I don't care what they say. I'm going to live to find out if we're having a boy or girl. And I just kind of, like I said, I hit this point where I'm like, Lord, this isn't the end of the story. And I don't know if I have a couple days or a couple hours or a couple weeks, but I know the end of my story. And I didn't want people to say, you didn't want to know Matt at the end. He was scared. He was different. It was, man, what does it look like to choose joy today? What does it look like to find special moments today, whether it's conversations with my nurses and doctors, my family and friends? And I want to be me right to the end. And I kind of waited to die and never did.
Well, what blows my mind is like the connection of like, well, I heard like some other linemen who are like, you were in a cherry picker, say that when this happens, like the person that's in the cherry picker usually doesn't even get out of there. When electricity like has nowhere to go, it just keeps like staying in there and pretty much destroys the person that's in there.
For sure. It's
because of your incident, 2 years beforehand, what did they say? Like you had the plates in your head or something that.
Yeah, that's one of the theories, is that like, linemen use insulated fiberglass buckets. We didn't know that. And tree trimmers do too. Yeah. I was in a big steel high reach, which is, basically a big conductor. They explained how if you ever vacuuming and it comes unplugged, when you plug it in, it kind of sparks. That's 110 volts jumping a half inch. You take, a 3-phase 12 to 21,000 volt line and put a big piece of metal in the air. It's basically like a big ground. Ooh. And typically if somebody's in that situation, unless the breaker trips, it'll hold you there till there's really no moisture in your body. It's really quick. It's really powerful. And I was holding the controls of this bucket, kind of like that. And it was kind of running a loop. Everyone can see my burns. They kind of run across my chest and down my arms like that. And I had headphones on, wired headphones, and it went down. It melted my iPhone to my leg, and then it went up, and the earbuds melted into my ears, and it burned this plate in my chin, this plate in my eye, and exited through the front and back of my skull. So they think rather than it drawing down to the metal I was standing on, I had enough metal in my head that it went up and then didn't know where to go, and it helped break the current. So, so that could be part of what it let me go.
Yeah.
But even that, like, I actually met an EMT yesterday, and it was a reminder. He said, look, in 25 years, he said, I've never been to an electrocution call where the person made it to the hospital. He said, I've lost 100%. So,
well, it's like, I guess God certainly had more in store for your life. And so I just love, too, like, your mindset of, like, I'm going to live to hear the gender of my baby. So you made it to that, and you find out we're having
a little boy. We had the coolest gender reveal. This lady that made these like organic popsicles, she's like, I want to do your gender reveal and do something Matt can do. So we had friends and family come into the waiting room, and we all waited and pulled it off, and there were these blue popsicles, and it was awesome.
Oh,
that's so amazing. Like, yeah, the Lord definitely has a plan for you and continues to have a plan for you. Now you went through so much therapy and hard work to, get to where you're at today. And we were just at Matt's house the other day, just a few weeks ago, and he's just like doing moves I've never seen, like 360 varials on the back of the wake, and, like foil surfing, like you're saying behind there. And it's, it's just awesome. Like, Bethany still charging in the water and pursuing her passions. You're pursuing your passions that God's given you. But it also has provided this awesome platform for you to share the gospel and share hope in Christ, to say like, hey, bad things happen in our lives, but, God has a plan and can work through these things, and to say like, don't despair when these things happen, but lean on the Lord, lean on Him, and He will, provide peace and understanding and provide a way through these hard times. So, dude, like your story is just a huge testament of faith and
really, it's like God's been faithful to you, right? I feel like you would say that. So, what did kind of your next? How was your recovery from that injury? And eventually, you're clearly still here. Now you have 3 children, and even, you're just the epic dad, and I love your family, and I just see so much joy on a daily basis in your household. Share with us, like, what's life like now with Matt and the crew?
Yeah, life now with Matt and the crew, it's every day is different. I mean, we like you guys, we're always traveling. That's why half the time it'll be like Meet Adam or something will text each other late, like, hey, we're here for 10 days. If you guys could get around or you're around here, join us. But yeah, our life is full of adventure. The boys love nature. They love snakes and alligators, and they love fishing and swimming and going out on the boat. So a lot of our life is outdoors. We love to adventure. We love tent camping, and just really, it sounds so cliche when you say, oh, live life to the fullest, don't take a day for granted. But I think people like you and me, Bethany, who've been through something where we know how quickly life can change, it really makes you wake up and say, man, what am I doing with today? Am I really savoring it and getting the most out of it? Because it's a gift. One thing I wanted to touch on earlier from the fairness of God question, I like to, when people ask me that, I say, I've studied a lot, and I think God is actually pretty unfair. And what I mean by that is, what is fair? Fair is what should happen does happen. You touch the stove, your fingers burn. It's not unfair. You touch the stove. And if we just look at it theologically, like the wages of sin is death, and who have sinned, all have sinned. So we say, oh, why does bad things happen to good people? Well, what is a good person? We are all sinners in need of a savior. And for him to say, hey, I'm going to come in, what's fair is that we don't get to live the life we live. But we serve an unfair God who's crazy about us. And he says, hey, it's not fair and it's not deserved. That's why it's called grace. But not only am I going to give you eternity, but in the midst of your trials here, your struggles, your ups and downs and everything in the middle, if you'll trust me, I'll walk through it with you. And then I look at like my accident and I say, why is it that the best doctors said it's not when you die, but if you die? They're sure there was heart damage. Sure, we're 9 hours from a scheduled amputation of both my arms at the shoulders, and all these things that should have happened didn't. And I'm like, why? Because we serve an unfair God that's crazy about us. And every once in a while he steps in the world and says, this is still my world. It's still my people. And I still do miracles. And he's given us everything to move through this life here. And it's amazing.
Yeah, that actually too, I want to backtrack as well. You mentioned Job, because a lot of people might not have heard of Job's story, but Job was like the wealthiest man. Can you kind of dive into that a little more, like your take on Job's life, and like elaborate on this man who is very well off and then he goes to like having nothing?
Yeah, he was super well off. He had a huge family, tons of land, tons of animals, the biggest houses of the time. And all of that is taken away. Satan's kind of like, I'm going to go mess with his life. And he does. And even Job's wife.
Taking his wife and family and like
yeah.
all like the most like precious,
the
aspect.
Most precious of everything. And it's so hard. You look at his life and you look at his posture before God, and he does question God, and he's like, what have I done to deserve this? And God's answer, like, it's like a 40-something chapter book, but at the end, the conclusion is, God's like, where were you when I hung the moon and the stars in the sky? Like, I have such a bigger vision and plan than you could ever wrap your head around. And in a sense, you didn't do anything to specifically deserve this. You're not being punished, but you live in a broken world, and there's an enemy prowling around like a lion to seek and kill, destroy everything. And that's true into this day. And Job stays faithful through it. And I love that there's a line in the Chronicles of Narnia where they're talking about Aslan, who represents God in that series. And and he says something about him being dangerous. And he goes, I thought he was safe. And they're like, no, he's not safe, but he's good. And I love that, because that's God, that like being in the will of God is not a safe place. Sometimes we give our life to Christ and things get harder than they've ever been. We lose friends that, liked our life before, if we're partying or whatever. We lose relationships. We could lose our job, whatever it is. But it's the only place to be. And it's not safe, but it's good. And he's going to work in it, and we get to watch him work in it.
Even Adam's been doing a Bible study with his guys, our churchmen, and even the interesting thing about Job's life too is his friends are trying to tell him lies, essentially.
Yeah, they're there to
one.
comfort him, but they're ultimately saying like, "Hey, Job, like you must have done something very, very wrong for this to happen to you." And Job's like,
I didn't.
No, like if this is punishment, like how about those guys over there who are very wicked and they're prospering? They should be destroyed. But no, like my life is being destroyed, but I still trust the Lord in this situation. I trust that, he still loves me and he's a good God, and that I'm going to get through this situation. And ultimately I know that I'm going to go live with him in eternity. It's kind of like Job says that to his friends, and they're like, no, that can't be right. No.
I love that you brought that up, because I think a lot of us have that theology without realizing it. Because I had so many people say in the hospital, they're like, man, I can't believe this happened to you when you were like kind of leaving a full-time wakeskate career to go into ministry, and then this happened. And it's like, if we amplify that theology, it obliterates God's character, because that's a works-based system. Because what that's implying, if we amplify that, well, when we do good things and good deeds, good will happen. When we do bad, bad will happen. And in that theory, all the atheists would die young of cancer and all the Christians would live long and prosper. But where's grace and mercy in that? I mean, that's not God's character. It's not we serve him and good things happen. It's that, you know, we live in a painful, broken world, and if we trust him, he's going to do amazing things in our peaks, in our valleys, and everything in between, and he's going to walk through it with us. And the end of the story is that we're moving towards eternity with him, and that's incredible.
I think what you brought up is, looking at our worldviews and our understanding of God. Like, so often the way we view the world and our life and what we should have or what we want isn't necessarily what God calls on our life. And we have these unrealistic expectations, not only on our life, but on God.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't you say so? Like, I just look at the world and the way culture is and where we're at as a society, and it's very like me-centered, and it's kind of affecting all of us regardless of, if you're of faith or not. I don't know. Want to riff off that?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's funny. There's something called the World Happiness Forum, and they measure happiness based on countries. And last year was the first year that America didn't make the top 20, and we went from 15 to 23 last year. And today, March 20th, they just released 2024 results, and we dropped down again to number 24, which I think is kind of ironic, because what's the catchphrase of America? The pursuit of happiness. You want to be an electrician? Go do that. You want to be a doctor, lawyer? Like, we've got resources and schools and training. You can do anything you want. And your job in America is to pursue your own happiness. And we open up our Instagram or Facebook, and everybody's a guru. They're like, you do you, I'm gonna do me. Find your truth, which is different than her truth and his truth. And we're at a time where we're more focused on self-fulfillment than we've ever been. But according to studies, we're more unhappy than we've ever been. And it's like, well, maybe there really is one truth and one life. And, so many people ask me, like, how did you maintain joy through this? And I'm like, honestly, by taking the picture off of myself. Like, when you go through these accidents, people say, like, this is you time. You need to focus on you and your needs and get better and fight. But I'm like, no, it's hard to see the picture when you're in the frame. And when you look at your problem as the main focus, it becomes your world. And when I was in the hospital, looking back, a lot of what got me through and where I found joy was saying, man, there's a guy who was in the room next to me in the trauma step down who was, he had to have his hand cut off. And I remember, like, one day I knew he was super nervous about that surgery, and I was like, oh my goodness, he's got this surgery. I went next door to spend time and pray with him. And then I went down the hall to talk to one of the nurses, and my friend's dad was like, Matt, you have a big surgery tonight. And I was like, oh yeah, I do. and I had like forgot about it. But if I had sat in my room and been so focused on me and how happy I can be, I would have just been a nervous wreck. But it was like, as I tried to look around and say, okay, Lord, what do you put around me? Who's around me? How can I learn and grow? And what's the work you're doing here? It's like, yeah, my problems are still real, and I don't want to like bottle that or ignore that. But I'm thankful for all these things. I'm thankful for this ministry I have in the hospital. And then, yeah, I'm dealing with this stuff, but it doesn't consume my world.
Yeah, that's I feel like we all kind of fall into that trap where we get so consumed with ourselves. So, that really is encouraging to kind of look outside of ourselves. And like, when we have a family, like when you have like little children running around tugging at you, they kind of help you look outside yourself, because they're like, hey, I need attention. And so that definitely is we always talk about how like having children is one of the most life-changing, most beautiful things, because God places these little people in our lives that force us to be like loving on them, force us to look outside of ourselves and to show grace and mercy to them, show them the law too that they need to grow up with. And that's why, we just love hanging with your family, because you guys are so intentional, and your boys are such a joy to be with. And it's really a testament of like how intentional you are and Bobby are as parents, loving on them and really like shaping them to be men of God. And like it just blows my mind. Like the other day when we were on the dock, and I think it was Justice, said this beautiful prayer, from the heart, and it's like that's so beautiful, and like really encouraging to see other people out there who have a strong faith, and they're passing that faith, or like encouraging that faith into the next generation, because like the whole happiness thing, like that's just like a testament of how the culture in America is just decoupling from the truth of God. And like it's interesting to see that the happiness going down as like amount of like American Christians is lowering too. And when you said that, I was like, whoa, that's definitely got to be a correlation. So
Definitely.
Like,
and
being
I want to
intentional
say
with our
that
families is crucial.
I want to say off of what you said, thank you very much. But that also goes both ways. We love your family. You guys are amazing parents and so like-minded. And our boys, every time they're around you, every time we're around you guys, we end up with a picture of Uncle Adam with a pile of kids around him every night. He reads to the kids, and whenever we're around you guys after, they're like, when are we going to go see our friends again and hear stories from Uncle Adam? So you're an amazing dad too.
Cute.
And an amazing mom, Bethany.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Well,
I love when you talk about overcoming challenges. Bobby and I were playing ping pong, and I was holding your daughter, and she goes, Matt just beat me with one arm holding the baby," and Bethany goes, "Yeah, that doesn't impress me." She does everything with one arm, and she crushes it. So I love that.
What's some encouragement for some of the parents listening in, and what are you learning as you're getting further along into fatherhood? But you've also done a lot of mentoring for teenagers in wake surf. So
yeah, I mean there's a lot there. I mean it depends what stage we're talking. You're talking about teenagers or kids, but for me, one thing I'll do a lot of surf coaching and stuff, and I'll tell all the parents and the kids, like, whether you take this to a professional level or whether you want to keep it as a recreation, what sports teaches us is to fall and get back up. It teaches us principles that we're going to learn throughout our life. And like one thing I've been, Justice is the oldest, and he's really harsh on himself, and he holds a lot on his shoulders where he feels like he's got to keep the room organized and take care of his brothers. And sometimes it can get so overwhelming, there's almost like a shutdown. And I'll tell Justice, I'll say, the difference between people that are successful in this world and people that really struggle is that successful people solve problems. And one thing I'm trying to do in all areas of my parenting, whether it's with schoolwork or playing in the yard or trying to build a Lego thing, is that, all you're learning in life is how to venture problems, whether it's communication issues, whether it's physical issues, whatever it is. And if we can become good problem solvers, we'll become people that can add value to everybody around us. And people will want to come to you, and they'll want to learn, they'll want help. And on the discipleship journey, it's for us, it's just reaffirming to the kids that you'll never get in trouble for coming to us. Like we really, you'll never get in trouble for telling us the truth, but you will for hiding something. Because if we don't know, we can't help you. And always trying to be approachable to, you can come to mom and dad with anything, and then we can solve that problem together. But if we have to find out about it, and trying to just really drill in that mindset so they don't walk around with shame and guilt. And one of my favorite things to do, I don't have a better name for it. I don't know what to call it other than effing date night. And what I mean by that is I ask all the F questions. So I'll take my kids once a month on a date. It could just be like ice cream in the park or whatever. And I say, hey, how do you feel about our family on a scale of 1 to 10? And do you feel like we're getting enough time together? Are you communicating well? How do you feel about your future? Is there anything you're worried about? Is there anything you want to talk about? How do you feel about your friend group right now? Or how do you feel about your friends? How do you feel about your finances? Are you trying to save, 25 cents a week, or do you have goals? And ask all these questions that, that start with an F, and their family, friends, finances, future. What are your fears, to give them, that opportunity to share, Daddy, I'm really nervous about, and they'll blow my mind, the things they say. And one of my favorite ones is, what do you want to be set free from? To give them that place to not just say, you can always come to mom and dad, but actually say, hey, is there something that you're holding in that you want to be set free from, you want to talk about, and I'm here for you. And those are really helpful.
I love
cool.
that.
Absolutely.
So the effing date night with your child, and you talk about faith, friends, how you feel about family, some of the fears, how's your finances, future, and what else? I think that was it.
I think you covered it. I have it written down because I'll forget it. But
awesome.
That is amazing.
Totally
I'm so glad I kept going. I was like, I know Matt has one more nugget for us. That is so awesome.
Yeah. So I love doing that. And I actually just record those on my iPhone, because it's been amazing to just in a short time to listen to all of those answers, from Trig at age 4 to Trig at age 7 and 8. Like, I mean, it's so cute. Like, what does a 4-year-old worry about versus a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old? How does he feel about his faith? How does he feel about, his friendships and his family? And it's also helpful to Bobby and I, because there's times where I ask the family question and they're like, 10 out of 10 is usually what they say. But then I'm like, I try to dig in a little more, and I'm like, well, do you feel like you're getting enough time? And then sometimes it's like, well, actually, we've been traveling. Could we have some family time and, a board game night? And the other thing we've really implemented, I'll give you one more thing, is we do kind of like a traditional, like old school Sabbath, like Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, like a Old Testament. And we still go to church on Sunday, but that's been huge for us. That Friday night, Bobby always asks the kids through the week what dessert they want for their Sabbath dessert, and she'll make like brownies or cookies or ice cream. And Friday night, it kind of gives us all an excuse to be like, yep, sorry, like this is our time of rest. And we stay up late Friday night and watch movies and have game night together and have our dessert and go on adventures. And then Saturday morning, we sleep in and stay in our jammies half the day sometimes, or go for hikes and swims. And we just kind of use it as a recharge family day. And that's been huge in the past year, to just connect one day a week like that.
Love it, man. Well, thanks for your encouragement, Matt. It's been a blessing. And yeah, if you don't know Matt, he's hustling hard. Like, he's doing, going across the world. Like, he's really investing in his family. You have a book called Beyond the Burn, right?
Well, my company is Beyond the Burn. My book is called Beyond the Scars. It's on my website, which is beyondtheburn.life, or Amazon. But really, it's if I can just share one more thing about that. It's Beyond the Scars. Life is defined by who you are, not your circumstances. And that's probably the emphasis of most of what I want to convey to everybody, is that often I'll ask someone what their story is, and they'll say, oh, I'm a surfer, or, oh, I'm a skateboarder, whatever. And it's like, if my identity is Matt as a wake skater, well, at one point in that timeline, that's a great story. I'm young, I'm traveling the world doing what I love. At another point, it's all ripped away. And if my identity's in that, well, who am I? And so I try to focus on saying, when I ask what your story is, what the deeper question there is, I'm asking, who are you? And I think of that scene from The Lion King where Simba's like Hakuna Matata. He's just kind of this immature adolescent, like, no worries. I'm not going to worry about anyone else. I'm dancing around the jungle with my buddy. And then his people are suffering and, oppressed under this ruler. And the wise monkey, Rafiki, takes him to the reflection pond, and Simba looks down and he kind of is surprised. He sees a full-grown lion looking back, because he feels like a kid, but realizing like he's a grown up. And he asks him, he says, who are you? And that is such a piercing question. And Simba has this moment where it's like, you going to keep being this immature adolescent and dancing around the jungle, Hakuna Matata, I don't worry about anyone but myself? Or are you going to go be the leader that you're created to be and go save your people? And that's the question for all of us, that when we face challenges, we face loss, we face depression, we face financial struggles, we face an electrocution and, losing a limb. It's not that defines us, but it's who we are and who we are in that, and finding our identity, which you guys and I truly believe is our identities in Christ. And I can bring who I am into Matt as a father, as a husband, as a wake skater, as a friend, and in anything else I do. But I'm not defined. When people say, how do you know God's will for you is to be a speaker? And I travel and speak so much now. And I'm like, it's not. What happens if I've had 79 surgeries in 10 years? What happens when I have a surgery or get called in and I can't go travel? Am I living outside of God's will? But I think his will is for us to go then make disciples, to bring light, to be his hands and feet in anything we do. And I'll do that whether I'm speaking or surfing or having coffee with my friends, or as a father and a husband. So that's what I think all of us need.
Love
is to
it.
figure out
Thanks
who we
so
are.
much, Matt. We're cheering you and your family on. Can't wait for our next adventure and our conversation round 2 on all things possible.
Absolutely.
Aloha.
I love you guys so much. Thank you. Aloha.
Wow, I loved how Matt was just encouraging us to not let our circumstances kind of determine our joy or our ability to go out in the world and live our best, most faithful life. And
Yeah, I feel like it's such an amazing reminder that our identity is in Christ, not in the things that happen to us or the things that we do, but we need to remind ourselves that our identity is in him, and he calls us to love our neighbor, to love each other in all circumstances, wherever we may be, whether it's in the hospital or whether it's in our workplace or in our family. So really appreciated Matt and his encouragement in that space. And
yeah, thanks so much for listening, everyone. Until our next episode, have an amazing week.